My parents told me they were too broke for our annual trip. I, the daughter who had been secretly paying their mortgage for 5 years, understood. Until I saw my sister's photos from a first-class flight to Paris. So I stopped paying. When my dad's panicked call came, I had only one thing to say. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The text message arrived with a sterile, emotionless ping. It was from my mother, Brenda. I was sitting in my office, staring at a set of structural blueprints for a new university library, but my brain felt as fragile as spun glass. The migraine had been raging for 2 days, a throbbing drumbeat of pain behind my left eye that no amount of medication could silence. The light from my monitor felt like a physical assault. The message read, "Hi, sweetie. Awful news. Dad and I ran the numbers and we just can't afford the cabin trip this year. Taxes are a nightmare. Hope you understand. Love you." I closed my eyes, the pain and the disappointment merging into a dull ache. The cabin trip was our one, unchanging family tradition. For 15 years, we'd rented the same modest, slightly musty house in the mountains for a week in July. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. It was quiet. It was the one time of year I felt like I was actually part of the family, not just its invisible benefactor. "Hope you understand," she wrote. I understood all too well. I was Florence, the responsible one. The 42-year-old architectural engineer who worked 60-hour weeks. The one who hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. The one who, 5 years ago, had quietly stepped in when her retired teacher father and realtor mother mismanaged their finances into a corner. "I understand completely," I typed back, the lie tasting like ash. "Don't worry about it, we'll do it next year." I put the phone down and rubbed my temples, trying to dislodge the spike of pain. It was fine. I was fine. I had a deadline. I turned back to my blueprints, trying to focus on load-bearing walls and seismic codes. But a different, more personal calculation kept running in my head. For 5 years, I had been making the $3,200 monthly payment on their mortgage. My name wasn't on the deed. I had co-signed the loan to get them a new, lower rate, and a private agreement was drawn up by my lawyer stipulating that my payments were a loan against the estate. But for all intents and purposes, I was buying them their house. If I was paying their single biggest expense, how could they not afford a $2,000 cabin rental? I dismissed the thought. My mother, Brenda, worried about money constantly. My father, Arthur, was a retired history teacher who just wanted a quiet life. They were probably just being overly cautious. I'd send them some extra money for the taxes they mentioned. I'd fix it. That's what I always did. The real betrayal didn't land until 3 days later. The migraine had finally subsided, and I was scrolling through Instagram on a rare coffee break. And then I saw it. My sister, Jane. Jane, the 38-year-old golden child. The owner of a failing boutique she called Curated, and I called a black hole for money. The post wasn't just one photo, it was a carousel. The first was a shot of her 2 children, grinning from oversized plush seats. The kind of seats that recline flat. The kind of seats with champagne service. The caption, bubbly and oblivious, was a knife to the heart. "Surprise, Mom and Dad are the best. Off to Paris. Airplane-blessed Eiffel Tower, here we come, best grandparents ever." I swiped. There was Jane, clinking champagne glasses with her husband. There was another of her kids, a geotag hovering over the first-class lounge. I felt the blood drain from my face. The office hum around me faded to a dull roar. It wasn't just a lie. It was a monument to one. They didn't just have money, they had first-class to Paris money. They had lied to me, their dutiful, migraine-suffering, bill-paying daughter, so they could fund a lavish, European vacation for the one who had never sacrificed anything. I stared at the screen, the image of those first-class seats burning into my memory. The pain behind my eye was gone, replaced by something cold and heavy. I thought of the mortgage payment, $3,200, scheduled to auto-transfer from my account in 3 days. I picked up my phone, my hand perfectly steady. I logged into my bank. I navigated to the automatic payments. I found the one labeled Parents' Mortgage. And with a single, decisive tap, I canceled it. The betrayal was worse than any lie they had ever told. It was the truth. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing to fill a void or solve a problem. I just stopped. My migraine was gone, but it left behind at metallic post-pain clarity. My world had been tilted on its axis, and I was finally seeing the angle of it. I, the engineer, the planner, the one who lived by numbers and logic, had been operating on a faulty equation for decades. I believed my contributions, my sacrifices, were seen. I believed they were appreciated. I believed they were buying me a place at the family table. The Instagram post proved I wasn't even in the same restaurant. I went to work, I reviewed structural reports, I sat in meetings, I drank my coffee. But a part of my brain was working on a different problem. It was calculating. For 5 years, I had made that $3,200 payment. That was 60 payments. That was $192,000. That wasn't including the emergencies. The $5,000 for Jane's inventory crisis. The $2,800 for my nephew's braces, which Jane had insisted be the invisible, top-of-the-line kind. The $1,500 for a new water heater at my parents' house. I had spreadsheets for my work projects detailing every line item. Why had I never made one for my family? The thought repeated itself, a cold, hard line of code. They forgot what I pay for. The day the mortgage payment was due, I woke up with a strange sense of peace. The $3,200 that would normally have vanished from my checking account sat there, solid and real. I took a screenshot of it. Then, I transferred that exact amount, plus the extra $2,000 I'd been planning to send them for taxes, into a new, high-yield savings account. I titled the account Obel. In mythology, it was the coin for the ferryman to cross the river Styx. For me, it was the first payment on my own passage out of this personal hell. 2 days passed, then 3. The silence from my parents was deafening. They were in Paris, after all, or at least Jane and her family were. I assumed my parents were with them, but their phones went straight to voicemail. They were probably having too much fun sipping café au lait and ignoring the real world. The tension built in me, not as anxiety but as a compressed spring. I was waiting for the snap. It came on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the missed payment. I was at my desk, finalizing a render. My phone buzzed. It was Dad. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, I let it go to voicemail. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Dad, "Florence, call me. It's an emergency." Another text immediately after, the bank called, "Call me now." I smiled, a small, cold, precise smile. I looked at the text. I thought about the first-class seats. I thought about the lie. I thought about the $192,000. I put my phone on silent and turned it face down on my desk. I went back to my blueprints. The library's atrium needed a stronger support beam, and I was just the engineer to design it. A few hours later, my phone lit up with a call from my mother, Brenda. I stared at her name. The enabler. The one who had delivered the lie with such practiced ease. I answered, but I didn't say anything. "Florence, Florence, oh thank God, your father is having a panic attack." Her voice was shrill, laced with manufactured hysteria. "The bank called him. They said the mortgage payment is overdue. Can you believe it? They must have made a mistake. You need to call them right now and straighten this out." I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch. I pictured her, probably standing in her perfect kitchen, the one I was paying for. "Florence, did you hear me?" "I heard you, Mom," I said. My voice was calm. It was my boardroom voice. The one I used when a contractor was trying to pull a fast one. "Well, what are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. What do you mean nothing? Florence, this is serious. They're talking about penalties, about our credit." Mom, I said, and the coldness in my own voice surprised me. I'm very busy right now. I'm sure you and Dad can handle it. Handle it? How are we supposed to handle it? We don't have. She sputtered, the lie catching in her throat. You'll figure it out, I said. You seem to be very good at running the numbers these days. Before she could form another word, I hung up. I had work to do, and for the first time in a very long time, I was working for myself. To understand the depth of this, you have to understand Jane. My sister, Jane, exists in a world I don't recognize. It's a world filtered through Instagram, where reality is an ugly rumor and appearances are everything. Her boutique isn't a business. It's a stage. It's a backdrop for her to model overpriced linen outfits and minimalist jewelry, all while lamenting how hard it is to be a small business owner. But Jane has never, not once in her 38 years, faced a problem that someone else didn't solve for her. And that someone was almost always our parents, who in turn leaned on me. I am 4 years older than Jane. When she was going to prom, I was applying for scholarships. My stomach in knots, knowing my parents, a teacher and a part-time realtor, couldn't afford my tuition. I got the scholarships. I got the engineering degree. I got the high-pressure job. I did it all myself. When Jane wanted to open her boutique, she didn't write a business plan. She cried to our mother, Brenda. She said her dream was dying. My mother, who has always been susceptible to Jane's theatrics, co-signed a massive loan for her. When the business, predictably, failed to turn a profit, the bank came calling. My parents were on the hook. That was the night of the original sin. 5 years ago, my father Arthur called me, his voice rough with a shame I hadn't yet learned to distrust. Florence, he'd said, we're in trouble, we might lose the house. Jane's loan had put them in default. Their only option was to refinance, but their credit was shot. I was the solution. I was the good daughter, the one with the 6-figure salary and the perfect credit score. I met them at the bank. I co-signed their new mortgage. And when they sat me down at their kitchen table a week later, my mother weeping into a napkin, they confessed they couldn't even afford the new, lower payments. Just for a little while, Brenda had said, her hand covering mine. Just until we get back on our feet, until Arthur's pension fully kicks in. Of course, I'd said, because what else could I say? So I started paying $3,200 every month for 5 years. A little while became a permanent arrangement. Getting back on their feet never happened. Instead, I saw my mother wearing new designer handbags. I saw my father driving a new-to-him sedan. And I saw Jane, her boutique miraculously saved, posting about her self-made success. They had absorbed my sacrifice. It was no longer a lifeline I was throwing them. It was a utility, as basic and expected as water or electricity. My money was just there. I had never truly met my sister's husband. I mean, I'd seen him at Christmas, but he was always a vague, smiling man-bun of a person. His name was Todd, and Jane listed his profession on social media as visionary and creative director, which seemed to mean he took her photos and didn't have a job. The day after my call with my mother, Jane herself called me. I knew it would be her. My parents had failed to get the Florence utility back online, so they had deployed their only other weapon. Florence, she said, her voice dripping with the fake, syrupy concern she used on her customers. I just heard. What is going on? Mom is a complete wreck. Is she? I said, highlighting a line in a structural report. Yes, she said, you hung up on her, and something about the mortgage. Florence, what did you do? You know Dad can't handle this kind of stress. The blame, it was so fast, so reflexive, I hadn't done anything. I had stopped doing something. Where are you, Jane? I asked. What do you mean? I'm home, we just got back. We're all horribly jet-lagged, and now I have to deal with this family drama. It's a lot. How was Paris? A pause, a tiny, fractional hesitation. It was wonderful, she said, her voice shifting into its influencer mode. The kids just adored the Louvre. You should really try to get out more, Florence, you're so cooped up all the time. It looked expensive, I said. Well, that's the thing, she said, and her voice became conspiratorial, a girls-only tone. That's why Mom and Dad couldn't go to the cabin. They poured everything into this trip for us. It was a complete surprise. They're just so generous, you know? They wanted the kids to have this memory. A memory I paid for, I said. The line went silent. What did you just say? Jane's voice was sharp, the syrup gone. I said I paid for it, the first-class tickets, the hotel, the croissants, the Louvre, I paid for all of it. You are delusional, she spat. You're just jealous. You're jealous that I have a family, that I have a life, and that Mom and Dad love me. You're just a bitter, lonely woman with a checkbook. Mom warned me you'd be like this. Mom warned you, I repeated. The coldness was spreading, a block of ice forming in my chest. When? When they planned the trip, she said. Florence will have a fit if she finds out, so we'll just have to tell her a little white lie about the cabin. They knew you'd be petty about it. They knew. They hadn't just lied, they had conspired. They had anticipated my hurt and categorized it as petty. They had sacrificed our one shared tradition so the golden child could have more. Jane, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, you have no idea what you're talking about. I know that you're trying to ruin this. You're trying to make Mom and Dad homeless out of spite. I'm not trying to do anything, I said. I'm just cooped up. I hung up the phone. The word jealous echoed in my head. Was I jealous? No, I was an engineer. And I had just discovered a catastrophic structural flaw. The entire foundation of my family was a lie, and I was the only one who could see it. The shift from passive victim to active strategist wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. It was the only way I knew how to process the world. My family saw my silence as a tantrum, a petty fit that would pass. They saw me as an ATM that was temporarily out of order. They were waiting for me to come to my senses and resume my function. They had no idea that I wasn't just out of order. The entire machine had been decommissioned. My clever trap wasn't a complex scheme. It was the truth. It was the one thing my family had collectively agreed to ignore for 5 years. The leverage I held was the simple, mathematical fact that I was the one paying for their life. My inaction was the key. But inaction wasn't enough for my engineering brain. I needed data. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at my office, the quiet hum of the servers my only company. I opened a new file, a new spreadsheet, not for a client, but for me. I logged into my online banking. I went back 5 years. I created columns: date, amount, recipient, purpose. Column 1, mortgage, $3,200 x 60 months, $192,000. Column 2, emergencies. This took more time. I had to sift through Zelle payments, Venmo transactions, and old bank transfers. $5,000 for Jane's boutique inventory. $2,800 for nephew's braces. $1,500 for parents' water heater. $3,000 for Jane's property taxes. Her boutique was in the red. $2,200 for parents' car repair. The list went on. I worked for 3 hours. The numbers piled up, stark and unforgiving in the glow of the monitor. The total for emergencies, money I had classified in my head as gifts or loans that I knew would never be repaid, came to $41,750. Grand total, $233,750. I stared at the number. It was the cost of a down payment on a magnificent house. It was a luxury car. It was years of my own vacations, untaken. It was a visual, undeniable representation of my own secondary status in my family. Then I did something else. I remembered my mother was a former real estate agent. She knew the value of their house. I'd co-signed the refinance, which meant I still had access to the original loan documents. I pulled them up from my secure digital files. I looked at the original loan amount. I looked at the payments I had made. I ran a quick amortization schedule. Then I went on a real estate website and checked the Zestimate for their address. The house was worth nearly $950,000. The remaining mortgage, thanks to my payments, was only about $210,000. They were sitting on over $700,000 in equity. My broke parents weren't just solvent. They were, by any reasonable metric, wealthy. A new, chilling thought entered my mind. How did they pay for Paris? Even if they lied about the cabin, first-class tickets for 4 or more, and a week in Paris wasn't cheap. $20,000, $30,000, they didn't have that in checking. Arthur's pension and their social security covered their daily life, but not this. I opened a new browser tab. I went to the county recorder's website. I was a co-signatory on the mortgage. My name was on the loan, even if it wasn't on the deed. I had a right to look. I typed in their property information. I scrolled down. And there it was. Filed 6 weeks ago. A home equity line of credit, HELOC. A new loan, taken out against the equity that I had been building. They had borrowed $50,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. This wasn't a spontaneous, generous gift. This was a premeditated, calculated financial decision. They had looked at the asset I was funding, siphoned off a chunk of its value, and converted it into champagne and photo ops for Jane. They had stolen from me. They had stolen my money, my sacrifice, and given it to my sister. This entire time, they weren't just assuming I'd keep paying. They were counting on it. My $3,200 monthly payment wasn't just covering the mortgage. It was now covering the interest on their new, secret loan. I saved the document as a PDF. I added it to my OBL folder. The spreadsheet was no longer just a ledger. It was an invoice. And my investigation had just found the irrefutable proof of fraud. My phone, still on silent, lit up with another text. It was Arthur. "Florence, please, we are terrified. Brenda is sick with worry. Just tell us what to do, we'll pay the late fee, please turn the payment back on." I looked at the text. I looked at the $50,000 HELOC document. "Tell us what to do." "Oh, I will," I said to the empty office. "I finally will." I wasn't just an engineer. I was an architect. And I was about to redesign this entire relationship from the foundation up. The storm broke on Saturday. I knew they would come. My silence was a vacuum, and my family, particularly my mother and sister, abhorred a vacuum. They needed drama. They needed a resolution that put them back in the center and me back in my checkbook. My doorbell rang at 10:00 a.m. I was ready. I had spent the morning cleaning my apartment, not out of nervous energy, but to create a sterile, controlled environment. I had coffee brewing. I was dressed in crisp jeans and a simple, black cashmere sweater. I was the professional. They were the clients with a problem. I opened the door. There they were, Arthur, Brenda, and Jane, a united front of panic and indignation. My father, Arthur, looked pale and shrunken. My mother, Brenda, had her disappointed face on, the one she used when I brought home a 98 on a test instead of 100. And Jane was a vision of manufactured outrage. She wore a cream-colored knit lounge set that probably cost more than my first car, her arms crossed, her hip jutted out. "Florence," my father began, his voice trembling. "Thank God, why haven't you been answering your phone?" "I've been busy," I said. I stepped back, holding the door open. "Please come in." They filed into my living room. It's a minimalist space, gray, white, and wood with clean lines. It's the antithesis of my parents' overstuffed, tchotchke-filled house. They always seemed uncomfortable here, as if the lack of clutter was an accusation. "Okay, Florence, what is this?" Jane snapped before she even sat down. "This little stunt, it's over, you've made your point. Mom and Dad are terrified, just call the bank and fix it." I looked at her. "Fix what, Jane?" "Fix this," she gestured wildly. This mortgage thing, you can't just stop paying. What is wrong with you?" "I agree, Florence," my mother said, sinking into my armchair and placing a hand over her heart. This Cruelty, it's not like you to scare us like this, after all we've done for you. The sheer, unadulterated gall of that statement almost made me laugh. After all you've done for me. Yes, Jane said, we are a family, we support each other. And you, just because you're jealous of a little trip, you decide to hold Mom and Dad hostage. Jealous, I repeated. The word was a dull, flat stone. So the trip happened. Of course it happened, Jane said. It was a gift. A beautiful, generous gift that you are now trying to ruin. A gift, I said. I picked up my TV remote. My large, 65-inch television, normally off, was a black mirror on the wall. I turned it on. It was already set to the correct input. Florence, what are you doing? My father asked, his voice a weak whisper. He was the only one who looked truly afraid. He looked like a man who knew a bomb was ticking, but wasn't sure which wire to cut. I've been running some numbers, I said. You know, it's my job. I'm an engineer. I look for structural weaknesses. On the screen, my spreadsheet loaded. Crisp, clean, unforgiving. Florence Family Financials. I heard my mother gasp. Jane squinted. What is that? This, I said, is my data. I walked them through it, my voice as calm and steady as if I were presenting to a boardroom. This column, this is the mortgage. $3,200 a month for 60 months, totaling $192,000. My father sat down heavily. Florence, we were going to pay you back. This column, I continued, ignoring him, is emergencies. Let's look at this one, Jane. March 2022, $5,000. Boutique inventory. Or this one, September 2023, $3,000. Boutique property taxes. And my personal favorite, $2,800 for invisible braces. In total, $41,750 in gifts I've given, mostly to you, Jane. Jane's face was white. You said you wanted to help. I offered to help a family I thought was struggling, I said, which brings me to the grand total. The number glowed on the screen, $233,750. This, I said, is what I have personally invested into this family in the last 5 years. An investment I made because I was told we were in trouble. Because I was told we couldn't afford a $2,000 cabin trip. We couldn't, Brenda insisted, her voice rising. That's different money, Florence, that's equity. And there it was, the admission. I'm so glad you brought up equity, Mom, I said. I switched the input on the TV. The PDF from the county recorder's office filled the screen. Home equity line of credit, $50,000. What is that? Arthur whispered, staring at the screen. He genuinely didn't seem to know. That, I said, is the Paris trip. Isn't it, Mom, you and Jane? My mother, the former real estate agent, looked trapped. She looked at Arthur, then at me. Your father, he doesn't handle the big finances. It was an investment in our family, in Jane's children. You lied to me, Arthur said, his voice cracking. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at his wife. Brenda, you stole from our house. I did not, Brenda shrieked. It's our house, and Jane needed it, her family needed this, and Florence has so much, she doesn't even have a family, she has her job, she wouldn't even notice. She wouldn't even notice. The confession was so much worse than I could have imagined. I wasn't an ATM. I was a mine, a resource to be plundered, and I wasn't even supposed to notice the gaping holes left behind. You took out a $50,000 loan against the equity I built, assuming I would just keep paying the mortgage and the interest on your secret loan. Also, you, I looked at Jane, could post photos from first class. Jane's face was a mask of fury. You bought that house with our daughter, she screamed at my father. You always loved her more. This is what you get. This is what you get for trusting the boring one. It was a tantrum, poorly executed and revealing. She wasn't an adult. She was a child, and she had just been caught. My father, who had been silent, finally stood up. He looked at Brenda, his face ashen. He doesn't handle the big finances. he quoted, his voice shaking with a new, cold anger. Brenda, all these years, you told me she was helping. You didn't tell me she was paying for everything. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a dawning, horrifying clarity. Florence, is that true? This number, $233,750. I just nodded. He looked back at his wife and his golden child. The betrayal was no longer just mine. It was his, too, and his was, perhaps, worse. He had been a fool, I had just been a daughter. The following week was a blur of frantic, desperate attempts to regain control. But not by me, by Brenda and Jane. They tried everything. The first salvo was guilt. I received dozens of texts. From Brenda, your father isn't eating. He's just sitting in his study. I hope you're happy. From Jane, thanks to you, my kids are asking why Grandma is crying all the time. You've ruined their memory of Paris. When guilt didn't work, they turned to threats. Jane, in her infinite ignorance, left me a voicemail. I've spoken to a lawyer, Florence, she fumed, her voice tight. You abandoned your financial obligation, you co-signed that loan, you're just as responsible, you're ruining your own credit, you idiot. And when Mom and Dad lose the house, it's on you, it's all on you. Her threat was as flimsy as her boutique's business model. I was an idiot, but not for the reason she thought. I was an idiot for not seeing this sooner. I immediately called my own lawyer, the one who had drafted the original private loan agreement. Well, he said, after I'd explained the HELOC, this is something. Your agreement with them states that your payments are a loan against the estate to be paid upon their death or the sale of the house. But this new line of credit, Brenda taking that out without your knowledge, against the equity you've been building, that's perilously close to fraud. What are my options? I asked. You stop paying, which you've done. The bank will come after all co-signatories. That's you and your father. Your mother's name is on the deed, but not the original loan, correct? Just the HELOC. Correct, I said. Brenda's credit was so bad from Jane's boutique that the bank wouldn't put her on the refinance. Only Arthur and I had been creditworthy. Which means, my lawyer said, your father is the one in the crosshairs with you. But this HELOC, Brenda and Jane have been spending that money, I assume. Paris, I said. Right. Well, that $50,000 is now due. When the mortgage defaults, the bank can call all loans. They'll want their money. The $210,000 for the mortgage and the $50,000 for the HELOC. And if they can't pay, they'll force a sale. This was the case I was building. I wasn't just armed with a spreadsheet, I was armed with legal and financial reality. The final confrontation came not from me, but from my father. He showed up at my apartment alone. It was raining. He looked like he had aged 10 years. Florence, he said, not meeting my eye, can I come in? I let him in. He stood dripping in my entryway. I went to the bank, he said. I asked for the statements, all of them. This was new. Arthur, the retired history teacher, the man who didn't handle the big finances, had done his own investigation. I saw it, he said, his voice hollow. The HELOC, the withdrawals, $15,000 for Chanel, $20,000 transferred to Jane's account, $8,000 for Air France. He finally looked at me, his eyes wet. Brenda, she's been lying to me for years, not just about you, about everything. She and Jane, they're a team. Yes, I said, my heart aching for him. This was the man I remembered, the father who taught me how to ride a bike, the man who read history books to me at night. He wasn't weak, he was just trusting. She told me you were helping with the bills. A few hundred a month, she said, a daughter's contribution. She told me Jane's boutique was a huge success, that she was paying them back. He was still struggling with his loyalty. I could see it. He wanted to find a way for this to be a mistake. Dad, I said gently, I have something to show you. I didn't pull up the spreadsheet. I pulled up my bank statements. And then I pulled up the private loan agreement I had him sign 5 years ago. The one my lawyer drafted. The one that detailed, in no uncertain terms, that I was paying 100% of the mortgage and that it was a loan. His signature was at the bottom. He stared at it. I remember this, he whispered. Brenda told me it was a formality for taxes. It's a contract, Dad, I said. She lied, he said, the realization landing with the force of a physical blow. He sank onto my couch, his head in his hands. She and Jane, they've been playing me for a fool. They've been playing us, I corrected. He sat there for a long time. The only sound was the rain against the windows. The bank said we have until the 1st of the month, he said, or they begin foreclosure proceedings. That's 10 days. I know, I said. I don't have $3,200, and I certainly don't have $50,000. He looked up, his face a ruin of shame and fear. Florence, what do we do? Here it was, the moment, the shift. We don't do anything, I said. Brenda and Jane took out that money. They have to be the ones to pay it back. Call Jane. Tell her she needs to return the $20,000. Tell Brenda she needs to return the Chanel bags. They need to pay back the $50,000 now. Florence, you know they can't, he whispered. The money is gone. I know, I said, and I have a plan, but you're not going to like it, and you have to choose, right now, is it them, or is it us? He looked at me, the boring daughter, the lonely one, the one who had just been a utility. Us, he said, his voice stronger. It's us. The showdown wasn't at a holiday or a party. It was in the sterile, beige conference room of my lawyer's office. I had called the meeting. I called it the family restructuring. I told my father to bring my mother. I told Jane to be there, too. I said it was the only way to save the house. That, of course, got them in the door. Jane and Brenda arrived together, dressed in their weekend armor of expensive, casual clothes. They looked confident, like they had come to a negotiation. They clearly assumed I had caved, that I was there to be scolded and then, magnanimously, forgiven as I agreed to turn the money back on. My father and I were already seated at the long, polished table. My lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Mr. Harrison, sat at the head. Thank you all for coming, he said, opening a file. We are here to discuss the matter of the property on 24 Willow Creek Drive. Good, Brenda said, smiling brightly. Florence, dear, I'm so glad you've come to your senses. We were all so worried about you. I just looked at her. We have a default on the primary mortgage, co-signed by Mr. Arthur Evans and Ms. Florence Evans, Harrison said, his voice flat. And we have a HELOC of $50,000 taken out by Mrs. Brenda Evans, which is now also in default. The bank, as of this morning, is moving to foreclose. What? Brenda's smile vanished. No, Florence was going to pay it. She's paying the late fees, right, Florence? I remained silent. I looked at my father. He took a deep breath. No, Brenda, Arthur said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. She's not paying it. I'm not paying it. You are. Jane burst out laughing. A short, ugly bark. Dad, what are you talking about? You don't have any money. We don't have any money. Florence has all the money. That's how this works. The admission hung in the air, so stark and so sociopathic that even Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Jane, I said, that is perhaps the most honest thing you have ever said. I pushed a document across the table. This is my spreadsheet. The $233,750 I've spent on you all, but that's just for context. This, I pushed a second document, is the problem. The $50,000 HELOC. We get it, Jane said, rolling her eyes. You're mad about Paris. God, you're so petty. And this, I said, ignoring her, is the solution. I slid a third file across the table. It was a real estate listing, for their house. Brenda screamed. It wasn't a word, it was a sound. A high, thin shriek of outrage. You can't, how dare you are selling our home. No, I said calmly, you are today. You're insane, Jane yelled, standing up. She's insane, we're not selling. Actually, Mr. Harrison interjected, you are. You see, when the bank forecloses, you get nothing. The house is sold at auction, you get pennies on the dollar, and your credit is ruined for a decade. And the bank, well, they can still come after all of you for the difference. Including you, Ms. Evans, he nodded at Jane, as we have clear bank statements showing a transfer of $20,000 of the loan's funds directly to your account. You're an accessory to this. Jane's face went from red tea. Oh, a pasty, sickly white. That was a gift. Taking money from a fraudulent loan isn't a gift. It's called receipt of stolen property, Harrison said. But, I said, I'm an engineer, I like solutions, so I found one, I have a buyer. A buyer, Arthur said. My firm's development corporation, I said. We've been looking to acquire properties in your neighborhood. I presented the opportunity to them. They are willing to buy the house, in cash, for $900,000, which is $50,000 under market, but it's a fast, clean sale. We can close in 3 days. You want to profit off of this. Brenda was hyperventilating. I want this over, I said, and I want my money back. Mr. Harrison laid out the final page. It was a settlement. Here's how this works, he said. The $900,000 from the sale will go into escrow. First, we pay off the remaining $210,000 on the primary mortgage. Second, we pay off the $50,000 HELOC. Third, we pay off the private loan owed to my client, Ms. Florence Evans, in the amount of $233,750. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. After all debts are cleared, you will be left with $406,250. $400,000, Arthur whispered. Yes, I said. Enough for you and Mom to buy a very nice condo, outright, with no mortgage, and enough left over for a very comfortable retirement. The retirement you were supposed to have before you started funding Jane. Jane was staring at the paper, her eyes wide with frantic calculation. And me, what about me? What about my money? I looked at her, the moment I had been waiting for. You, I said, you get nothing. The Bank of Florence is permanently closed. This is theft, Jane shrieked. Mom, he's letting her do this. Dad, stop her. My father, who had been silent, looked at his wife, then at his younger daughter. The fog of his entire married life seemed to clear in that instant. He saw them for who they were. He picked up the pen. Arthur, no. Brenda lunged for his hand, but he was faster. He signed the listing agreement, a clean, strong signature. It's done, Brenda, he said, his voice hard. You and Jane, you wanted a blank check. Well, it just bounced. You wanted to know what I could afford? I can afford my daughter. The one who's been telling the truth. We're selling the house. Jane looked from her father to me, her face contorted in a mask of pure hatred. Then, in a final, powerful moment of realization, she turned that hatred on the person who had enabled her for 38 years. You, she screamed at my mother. You told me she'd just pay. You told me she was a lonely pushover. You ruined this. You ruined everything. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. My mother just sat there, small and defeated, staring at the numbers. The lie was finally, utterly over. The downfall was swift and absolute. The sale closed in 4 days. The speed of it was a mercy, like pulling off a bandage. Brenda, stripped of Jane's support and my father's willful ignorance, was a hollow shell. She signed the papers where Arthur told her to sign, her hand trembling. The woman who had orchestrated decades of financial and emotional manipulation was, in the end, a coward. Jane's ruin was more public. The $20,000 she'd received was gone. Her boutique, which had been surviving on cash infusions from the HELOC, couldn't make payroll. She was forced to declare bankruptcy. The going out of business signs on her windows were a stark, humiliating contrast to the blessed in Paris just weeks before. She tried to move in with a friend. She never, not once, called my father. My father and I handled the move. Going through the house, the one I had paid for but never truly felt welcome in, was a strange, sad exorcism. We packed 40 years of a life built on a faulty foundation. My father was quiet but resolute. He found a box of my old high school awards, math club, science fair, perfect attendance, tucked away in the attic. She always put Jane's dance trophies on the mantel, he said, his voice thick. I never even knew you'd kept these. It's okay, Dad, I said, and for the first time I meant it. No, he said, holding up a first-place medal. It's not, but it will be. My father took his half of the proceeds, the $406,250, and bought a beautiful two-bedroom condo in a new development near my apartment. He bought it in his name only. Brenda was with him, but the dynamic had fundamentally, seismically, shifted. She was a guest in his life now, not the architect of it. The power was gone. My $233,750 arrived in my account as a wire transfer. I looked at the number. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was the price of my own life, bought back at a terrible cost. I took that money and the $3,200 I had saved in the OBL account, and I put it all into my own portfolio. The reconciliation with my fa. There wasn't a single event, it's a process. It happens over coffee on Sunday mornings. It happens when he calls me just to talk about a history documentary he watched. It happens when he asks my advice on his finances, and I show him, on my own spreadsheet, how to make his money last. He is, for the first time, my father, and I am, for the first time, his daughter, not his savior. My mother lives with him. She is quiet. She is, I think, terrified of being left with nothing, which is the future she almost engineered for my father and me. I am civil to her, but the warmth is gone. I'm not sure it will ever return. I did, however, use my professional network for one last act of justice. My firm, which now owned the house, was gutting it for resale. I was walking the property with the foreman, and he mentioned finding a box of designer bags in the back of a closet. Apparently, Brenda had forgotten them in her haste. I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the $15,000 for Chanel. Toss them, I said. They're probably fakes. The last I heard, Jane was living in a one-bedroom apartment, trying to rebrand herself on social media as a minimalist, as if her poverty was an aesthetic choice. Last week, my father and I took a trip. We didn't go to Paris. We didn't go first class. We drove up to the mountains. We rented that same, slightly musty cabin. We sat on the porch, we drank coffee, and we watched the sun set. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was, finally, affordable.